Welcome to the Sunrise Project podcast. We are part of Grant's Pass Remembrance, a truth and reconciliation project on our community's history as a Sundown Town. And this podcast is an opportunity to hear stories from our neighbors and have conversations on race and get to be in process with each other. And so on that note, we were talking right before this on process. And you use the term co-learning, Emily, that I really like. I think that's what process is, actually.
It really is. Mm-hmm. It's that recognition and that realization that we are co-learners and that none of us have ever arrived at a place of knowing all that we need to know or understanding all that we need to understand, but that we continue to learn together alongside each other.
Yeah, that's it. That's something that we get to do in this space. It can be really tempting for us to want to clean up before we are with other people, particularly if it's recorded, to be just right. But that's not how life is. That's right. Not real life. And it's so worth those awkward, hard parts of being in process together. It's so worth doing that because the learning together, the going together, the being together is just gold.
It's gold, and it's also essential because we really can't do this on our own. Yeah. We really can't learn what we need to learn and sharpen each other and the ideas that sort of plant a seed for somebody else. That is essential in this process and continues to be so beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that, to your point, each other, let's not gloss over that. Yeah. Everyone has something of value to contribute to a conversation.
Yes.
And when we recognize that value and give confirmation to that value, we learn.
That's right.
Because we don't all know everything. So when we give space for each other to contribute to a conversation, their ideas, their thoughts, their insights.
And their questions.
Right. We learn from that.
Mm-hmm. Very much. Very much. You were mentioning something early, Mike, that really caught me. This part about how, now we'll get into this more later. I know I haven't even introduced our guests yet, but we'll get there. About how when you take your Common Ground Conversations training to different spaces, that you're endlessly learning new things just because the space has changed and there's new people there, even though the content that you're bringing is the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. When we introduce a piece of content in our micro sessions and give space for conversation around that content, the conversation is always different depending on who's in the room. Because as I said before, everyone has something of value to contribute to these conversations. And we just have to be curious enough to want to know, what is it that you think about this piece of information?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. Every single group, even we've had clients, the same client that brings in different groups, the same client in the same content, and we walk away and I remember even a couple months ago, we said that was so amazing and it was different entirely from the last group, the same group with a different group, but it's just incredible the way that humans bring so much different perspective, questions, wonderings, ideas, insights.
Yeah. I have this like deepening in me and thinking about doing this in everyday life. This like, if I really held at the forefront the value of each human that I encounter and that curiosity and openness, just what beauty can come from that. It's so easy to close off and to lessen in our curiosity. Yeah. So this isn't just in these kinds of moments. It's that reality of this can happen at every layer of our lives.
I love that, Gabby.
Yeah.
In all of our life. I love that.
Well, my friends, we are here today with Emily and Mike Green, and they are the founders of Common Ground Conversations on Race. And thank you so much for being here.
We're so glad to be here.
It's just such an honor to have you here. So let's start with, you are our first guests that actually aren't living in and call Grants Pass home, but you're not far.
That's right.
Southern Oregon is your home. We share that with you, and you two find yourselves in Medford. But tell us, where would we find you out and about in Medford if we happen to be around, or what little nooks and crannies do you find yourselves in there?
I love that question. We're actually in Central Point, so right next to Medford.
Yeah.
And we love Central Point, right up the road from Grants Pass. I will say I love the Grants Pass community, especially. And as we drove through town, I said to Mike, I have such a warmth and fondness for this city. My grandparents had a business here, and my mom and aunt and uncle were raised here. And so my childhood is sprinkled with so much affection for this community.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting just driving down, right through town. It's just, the soda fountain and all the places that were just integral to my childhood. So,
And it's funny because when I first moved to Oregon,
Yes.
and I'm not from Oregon, so when I first moved to Oregon, chasing after this sweet lady, the first place I lived was Grants Pass.
right.
How fun.
That's right. So we're not technically here, but we do love this place.
Yes.
And in Central Point and in Southern Oregon in general, it's interesting where you'd find us. Well, we're in homeschool communities, and we're homeschooling family. So we're in pockets of different co-ops and different learning spaces. We are also often on the sidelines of fields. Our boys are really, really interested and passionate athletes. And so it's soccer season and almost football season. So most days in the evening, you'll find us at a practice and a game on the weekend.
Or on the pickleball court.
Or pickleball.
Ooh.
That's true too. We have recently, as a family, started loving pickleball. It's just been funny, but we do love it. So it's been this summer, we are often on the pickleball courts.
Yes,
So
and our boys are quite proficient now.
yes.
We've just recently gotten into pickleball, so we might have to keep talking about this
Really
later.
good. It's a surprising development for sure for us.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah. What else
So
did you
about
add to
you?
that, babe? Where else are we around town?
I don't know. We have a circle, a network of friends. And so we're often with our friends in various different places.
Yeah.
Or with
but-
extended family.
Or extended family,
And family
but
in town.
outdoors somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Outdoors on a field, on a side lane.
Or at a park or at
Or
a river.
in the school year in learning spaces with a lot of community.
I know you've
Yeah.
done some extensive work with bass in Medford, yes?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
we know and love Vance Beach.
So much. Yeah, it's been delightful. I remember when we first met Vance, and it was actually summer 2020, and we were learning about some of the ideas and dreams and vision for bass that was just starting to unfold. And so to see where it's grown and to see what continues to flourish is so great. It's just
He's
so
building
good.
community
He's building community.
in a way that did not exist before he got here.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've watched it from its infancy
And been blessed to participate in it
and
and
support it
and support and just be.
in our little way.
I know it's just it's been really great to be a little small part.
Oh, that's beautiful. And do you have any spaces on Sundays or Saturdays that you find yourself? Is there a church home that?
We're sort of in a little flux with that.
Yep, these things happen.
Yeah. The boys and I have been happily participating in Community Bible Study, which is Thursday mornings for the last 8 or 9 years. So that's been a sweet space of like interdenominational fellowship on a weekly basis.
Very cool.
I'm excited about the family fellowship Bible study that we do every week.
Yes.
My son,
Yeah.
who lives in Tucson with his wife and their kids, he
Yeah.
leads it. And so my family in Houston is involved. My family in Tucson is involved. I'm involved. And so it's just, having this kind of deep dive into biblical history, into our society today and how it relates.
Yes.
We're just as a family, we're learning and exploring, and we do this on a weekly basis, and it's led by our children.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Oh, how neat. Well, the next question is one that we ask everybody. And so we'll start with you, Emily,
Yes.
and Mike will go to you next. But why does race matter to you?
It's such a great question. I have a couple thoughts that come to mind. And the first one is I consider, why does race matter? I think about the construct of race that was created. I think about the fact that this construct of race was created based on skin tone and skin color in our nation. And this hierarchy of value of humans came out of that. And so I think as a human being who values human beings and who recognizes this construct as being something that's made up, that doesn't actually reflect the truth of human value. Yeah. And my heart is to honor human value. And so it matters to me because humans matter and all humans matter. And so the construct that has been created, that's sort of been maintained and sustained throughout our nation and continues to exist, I'm glad to see it, right? And as I see it, know that it doesn't align with my belief in human value. Yeah. So that's the first part. And then the second part is I find myself in an interracial relationship and raising biracial kids. And so as I've come to understand the concept of race, it's been essential to have a really deep understanding for me as a human, as a mama, as a wife, as a person in society raising children and caring about my children and all children. And wanting to step into creating something better. And I think I do want to say about race, and this is something that we're pretty passionate about in our work, is it can feel so daunting, as a word or as a concept, especially for people that are in white bodies. Like it can be something that you want to avoid or you're not sure how to talk about. And what continues to happen, and what I continue to learn as a co-learner, is that the more we just identify a name and sort of deal with like facts and truthful information, it sort of demystifies the fear or the intimidation of talking about something that may feel a little you're not sure how to discuss. And so what we do is we just discuss it and we sort of identify and know what it is, and as we do, then we can create something different. So
yeah. How about you, Mike?
Well, I just want to build upon what Emily said, because she's very eloquent and insightful, and she touched on a couple of points. This idea of racial hierarchy, which is the valuing and devaluing of humans by race. And living in a white society, a vast majority of white Americans tend to avoid this issue. So why is it important to me? Well, it's important to me because it was forced upon me from the very beginning when the Europeans arrived on this continent. The second most important issue was race. The first was the pursuit of wealth. And so race and economics have always been intertwined from the very beginning of the nation, when they established a whites-only citizenry. And the labor was the importation of African people, all kinds of people, doctors, lawyers, moms, children, and they just identified them as slaves. And so the issue of race was created by white people. It was the second most important issue by white people. It's been ingrained in all the laws, the systems, the public policies, and private sector practices from the very beginning of this nation all the way to today, passed down through 26 generations. And so when I am engaged in the discussion of race, it seems ironic to me that the vast majority of white people in this country either do not know their own history as the architects of race, the architects of racial hierarchy, the architects of this construct in our society. It is ironic that they are the ones who most want to avoid it when they are the ones who created it and forced it upon the rest of us. So it is important to me because I want to engage in discussions about race with the architects of race and to educate them and have them educate me. And for us together to recognize we inherited a society that none of us created. But guess what? we can all play a role in the society that we pass on to future generations. And so if we don't like the way that this concept of racial hierarchy and white supremacy exists in our society today, we get a chance to change that. And so that's why it's important to me.
Yeah. I'm caught by a phrase that you just used that I'm not used to. You shared wanting to educate them and wanting them to educate you. There's a humility and grace there that I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, because that sounds hard.
Well, yes. I grew up in a white society.
Yeah.
And so my education has been more of an indoctrination.
Yes.
And as I find out more about the history of this country and my ancestors' role in the history of the country and the building of this country, and the erasure of the value that we provided in this country. As I find out more, I want to share that with others. And then I want them to provide feedback to me. What do they think about these issues that, oh, by the way, they weren't taught either?
Yes, yes.
And so we're all learning. As Emily said before, it's a co-learning process. And so I have to be open to understanding and hearing and listening and curious about, what do you think about this information that both of us are now discovering together?
Yes. Oh, that's a good way to, thank you for fleshing that out. Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested in diving into hearing about what Common Ground Conversations is. Now, I want to mention that your website is phenomenal.
Thank you,
It
Gabby.
is commongroundconversations.com.
Thank you.
So please go there for even more information. But if you could give us kind of a picture of it so that we can keep all kind of on the same page as we talk.
Sure. Well, it has grown and changed and taken on new shapes in the last few years. But what we have arrived at, or where we are now, we haven't arrived, but what now seems to be really beautiful and functional is we have a 4-hour Common Ground Conversations journey, so a CGC journey. And we do this 4-hour journey with clients in person, and it is interactive. It is, sort of a combination of learning information together and then dialogue about that information. And we do it as a story. This really started as how to talk to kids about race in America in 2019. And so it grew out of, how do we talk to our kids about race? And what we find and continue to find is the way that we talk with kids about race, and we do in our home, is really a way that we all resonate with. It's a story that's not overcomplicated. And so we sort of tell the story of our nation from beginning to today. We tell the story. Throughout the story, we pause for conversation and questions. And then we sort of come to where we are today as a nation. And we have an additional activities workshop that we get to do with clients that we love. We did it with several clients this spring. And so it's the part 2, it's another 4 hours. And it's where we take all that we've learned and contemplated together, and we do some activities where we do some active listening, and we do some systems awareness, and we do some, let's take what we've learned and sort of vision it forward. So, but kind of what we offer as a standard offering is a 4-hour process. During COVID, we did so many facilitations online. And, we all experienced the online process, and it was like positive and negative, and there was mixed reviews. But what we found, I always thought, it's definitely it feels more valuable in person. But the feedback was online felt, and I remember we were so blessed when an HR director hired us for her city. And afterwards she said, this was the best online. It was a 3-hour. We did a 3-hour online.
Yeah.
So we've done 3-hour online CGCs that have, been great. We get to see everybody's face, and we still can kind of connect together. But now out of that, we've been primarily in person.
Right. And the process is kind of like what I expressed to you. It's broken into micro sessions. We introduce a piece of paradigm shifting information, something that gives you an aha moment or an epiphany. And
Or discomfort, often discomfort, which can be an epiphany or an aha, but just...
It can be. But how people receive information, I don't know that we feel responsible for, because it's not like we're sharing. These are not personal anecdotes. These are not experiences that Emily and I have had, and we're not inviting experiences, personal experiences. This is not a session where everyone's just sharing their personal experiences. Oh no, we're going back and looking at the people who actually shaped this society, who molded, who created the laws, the systems, the public policies, and the private sector practices. And we're saying, these are what these people said. How do you feel about that? How does that work today? And before we get into that, we started with what we call a common frame of reference, something that we all can agree on. We all agree that we live on one planet. You see how far back we're going?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we all come from families that are diverse. You know, people have different family members, but we're all part of a human family. And we all have a diverse human family. Can we all agree on that? And we begin to move forward, and we teach our children how to interact with one another in society. And so we have a frame of reference called consideration. And if you ask our kids, our boys 10 and 12, what does consideration mean? They will probably say in unison, kind, generous, and sharing. And so we use that frame as we say, okay, now we're going to take you through 3 eras of U.S. history, era 1, 2, and 3. And we break it down between the antebellum era, from the beginning of the country to the Civil War. And then from the Civil War, we have one generation that is era 2, because in more change in this country occurred in one generation than in all the generations previous and all the generations since. And so we can learn a lot from that one generation. And then we go to the era 3, which is the generations of after what we call the greatest generation, after that generation, all the way to the present day. And we provide resources, specific resources, and quotes, and data that translates to what is happening today. And when by the time we get to today and we show the data on the vast inequalities that have occurred in this country, and we begin to invite feedback on whether or not people think that we are making progress, stagnation, or regress. What is their interpretation of where we are today based upon what they know now? And it's very much interesting that before we start that, we ask them to take a little survey. That's a personal survey. You get to put numbers next to the statements. And then at the end, we ask you to take that same survey again. It's a reflection survey. So you get to determine on your own, with no one else knowing, whether or not you have changed in your perspective, in your heart, in your mind, based upon those 4 hours of experience. And what we've seen is that when we come into these conversations, people come with a lot of different ideas and backgrounds, and some are skeptical, some are reluctant with the arms folded, but you can see the arms come from unfolded. People begin to engage. There's the energy that starts to go up, and by the end, people are making these inquiries with among themselves in these our table talk conversations, and the energy is so palpable. There's laughter and there's frivolity, and I mean, in a conversation about race, you wouldn't think that, but it happens consistently over and over and over, and that's why we haven't had to market what we do. It's repeat clients and client referrals. I'm sorry to take so much time.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. Emily, did you want to add and build on that?
Yeah,
in
I
any
do.
way,
As
or-
you were talking, I was thinking oftentimes, and we talked about this a little bit, Gabby, before we started, but oftentimes people start our time together with the question, and sometimes as they go through, how can I implement this? How can I utilize what I'm learning in my life? Like, help me translate what I'm learning. And what Mike and I say often, and we see this over, and I experience it as a learner, that as my lens broadens and widens, as my understanding deepens, then my next right step often opens up for me in the space I'm in, right? And so we aren't prescriptive.
Right.
And we aren't going to offer a formula for 1, 2, and 3 when you leave here, but we do believe in people's capacity to be empathetic societal change agents. I believe it.
Yeah.
And as our empathy deepens and our lens widens, then wherever we find ourselves in the world, we see, experience, hear, maybe in a new way.
Yeah.
And then the point of action for us, small or large, kind of may become more clear.
Yeah.
And then we'll take that step, and then that step will create something that may open up the next step, right? And so
There is one thing that I would add to that.
Yeah.
There is one prescription,
Yeah.
and that is to continue learning.
Oh, right.
Because we're opening up a tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Right.
And when people realize that there are so many things that they weren't exposed to, that they didn't learn, you hear this over and over. And
Sure.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. That is a constant refrain.
Yes.
And it's information that we should know. It is, if you gave a test to most of us adults about the things that we should know about this country, we would never pass it because we were never taught this, and we're not teaching it to our kids. And one of the things we say, we can't teach what we don't know. And so we have to be learners, lifelong learners. And we're actually building a CGC Learning Library specifically for that, because we know there's so much information out there. People say, well, where do I start?
Yeah.
And we want to help with that.
Yeah.
Ah, that's beautiful. There's a way in which, in listening to you talk, it's actually helping inform me in thinking about our work with Grants Pass Remembrance in our community. We talk about being a sunrise community, the opposite of a sundown town, and what does that mean? And it can be hard for people, I think, to grasp on to what it means.
That's right.
Because so much of it isn't prescriptive.
It's not prescriptive.
Yeah.
But also, and I was thinking of this when you were talking about how so often people will hear something when we're learning together and they'll go, I never knew this. So many of us come into these spaces with a point of interest or personal sort of, not affinity, but something we're interested in. So if something is revealed or learned, then they will leave that time together and go, oh, I want to learn more about that thing, because it's something that's inherent to their interest, their passion, their life. And so they'll learn about that, and then that will open up something for them.
And that
And
actually
so we all
happened.
bring to the table our own unique gifts, passions.
Yeah.
We don't come as, we come as humans,
Yeah.
and then we learn something, and something in us resonates often
Yeah.
in ways that we can't predict or anticipate.
Yeah.
But if we're open,
Yeah.
sorry.
I just wanted to give an example of what you were talking about. So early on, one of our friends, after this was how to talk to kids about race workshop, even before Common Ground Conversations,
Yeah.
which is the foundation upon which we built CGC, came from the workshop. He asked me privately,
Yeah.
how do I become a white radical? And that may sound strange to the ears of people today, because we've flipped the word radical on its head. It means something completely different today than it used to mean. In the era of the greatest generation, the people who created the 13th, the 14th, the 15th Amendments, they were white radicals in Congress. What it meant to them was that black people were equal to white people in all ways. Now you say, well, that doesn't sound like a radical thought. At that time, that was a very radical thought. The mainstream ideology of America was white supremacy. It was a whites-only citizenry. So they had, in order to put into effect what they believed, they had to change the laws, not the people. Yeah. They had to change the laws. They had to change the systems. They had to change the public policies. And so what they did, and this happened in Congress for the very first time in our history, they prioritized the economic and political empowerment of black people. And in so doing, other people also benefited. And they still continue to benefit to this day from the 13th, 14th, to 15th Amendment. Plus, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was the very first Civil Rights Act. And we've had 20 Civil Rights Acts since 1865, all the way through 2006. So when we think of the Civil Rights Movement, that's much longer than the 1960s.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Tom is our friend who wanted to understand, well, what could he do to be a white radical in the space where he was? Yeah. And so without prescribing what you should do, what he should do, I just simply explained to him what a white radical was. And in the space where you are, how are people being treated differently that should be treated equally? Mm-hmm. And what can be done in that space to educate, to uplift, to encourage, to support, to create an environment where all people are valued equally and treated equally? And he went out and did something spectacular. I don't want to say what it was. Here in the Rogue Valley, there is the work of white radicals being done.
Yes.
And I'm excited about it.
Yes. When you, I will be going back after this is recorded. I'm so thankful for recordings and writing down what you said there, because that's our description of a Sunrise community. That's it, is how are we caring for our neighbors and how are we lifting each other up, and how, the words curious, that's a word that we use a lot, that learning piece, that listening piece, but that next right thing in the space that you're in. And how are you, what will that look like for you? It will look different for each one of us.
That's right, it will.
It will look different.
As it should.
Yes, we need it to. It's wonderful. Right. We are diverse, so we need that continued diversity of what it will look like. That excites me. There was a quote that I wrote down, and it's essentially what we've been talking about, but I have to read it anyway, just because I just loved how you said it. It was somewhere on the website, but there is a way forward together when we build off of a common ground of understanding. I think I did a repeat thing on that, so I was trying to read it. Yeah, there is a way forward together when we build a common ground of understanding. There's something about that just really caught me. Those elements of a way forward, that element of together, and that element of that starting point, that common ground of understanding. And you talked about that earlier, but could we talk again? Is there anything else to add to that? What is that common ground of understanding?
Yeah, I think Mike sort of spoke to some of it, but really we spend some time as we open up finding the places that we do agree. And again, in the fact that we all do live on this one planetary home, that we are all humans, that we, come in diverse shapes and colors. And so we just sort of build to the place of we are all humans with human value. And we do really agree that.
We do, yeah.
We do.
Equal value.
Human value. So then let's look at how that's been kind of flipped. And then let's course correct. Right?
Yeah.
That's it. And there are those of us who believe in reconstruction, that the society we inherited is not the society that works best for everyone. And so we have agency and power to change that. But we can't do it alone. We have to do it together. And so we have to find areas of common beliefs and common ideas and common goals, and then begin to develop a process by which we can work together collaboratively to move forward in ways that are measurable, with outcomes that are measurable. And so we need a vision, we need a strategy, we need a plan, we need commitments, we need investments, and we need measurable results and outcomes. And so all of those things are part of the process.
Yeah.
But it all starts with establishing, what do we agree on?
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned the active listening exercise that we do.
Yeah.
And that space of listening, I think it's so hard sometimes to find common ground, because it's really hard sometimes to listen well and to share well with mutual respect and honoring. It can feel really hard. And I think when we stay in that place of, this feels really hard because you're other and I'm here, and we kind of just, we really can't co-create when we have that arm length, a little hardening of our heart or mind. I think when we can sort of release that and listen, open-hearted and open-minded listening, that's really that beautiful Genesis place of like, now let's build. Because typically in that space, we do really share some very kind of common core beliefs, if that's the right word. You know, we do agree together in that quiet space where defenses are down, where we're listening well. Yes, we do really want all humans to flourish, right? We do want that. How can we create that?
Right. And I think that if we start where we are, what we believe, we will find that there's a whole broad spectrum of beliefs that seems chaotic and confusing. But if we back up, if we start to go back into history, where is the root cause of all this chaos and confusion? We get to a place where we can identify. And now we can have a discussion about that.
It takes it from here to sort of, we hold the thing right here and we look at it together.
Look at it.
Let's all look at this thing together.
Yeah.
For instance, let's look at the story of how this thing came to be. We're looking together instead of we are doing this. That is a beautiful way of describing it, of looking together at the thing, at the story, right?
There's something about that too that's essential to getting into a position where you can do co-learning, and I love the word co-creating, which is that way forward together. But until we establish this piece, we can't really do that co-learning and co-creating, which is, I can't even describe the kind of beauty that space holds with people that you might disagree with in a lot of different areas, but you can find those things that you can
hold and look together. And we really have to look at them and see them and name them. Yes. As we're sort of shoulder to shoulder, face to face, and then we can go, okay. I feel like that's what CGC does, is it brings people together to look at the thing together. And then we can look at the thing together, and once we've left, we go, okay, now we all have seen the thing. But now we can talk about what the thing is. We can name it. We can not be intimidated by talking about what it is. And now let's do something with it.
And I think that helps fill in the gaps in our knowledge and our experience, because we all experience America in different ways, depending on what side of the tracks we're born on, depending on our skin color, depending on our race, rather. We experience our society differently. And so if we back up and begin to look at our society that we all inherited and begin to ask the simple question, are we satisfied with this inheritance? Is this what we want? Because we didn't build it. We didn't create it. But is this what we want to pass on to our children? And once we begin to ask those kinds of questions and begin to redefine things, for example, I'll give you one example. Racial equity is huge. After George Floyd, racial equity and the efforts around racial equity just exploded. Just one data point, of the Fortune 1000 companies, I think the vast majority of them committed multiple billions of dollars. I think it was 1,369 companies, I believe, according to McKinsey & Company's Institute for Black Economic Mobility. They studied this report. $340 billion were committed by just a little more than 1,300 corporations. And the question was, well, what did they do with that money? And the commitment was to racial equity. And if you ask, and all in my work as a cultural economist, I ask the question, what does that mean? What does racial equity mean? And when you start to get responses, you see that they're all over the map. But if I ask Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or any type of investor, Warren Buffett, or any type of CEO, what does equity mean? And they will tell you it means ownership. Ownership of lands, homes, businesses, intellectual property. And so equitable ownership in the American dream of prosperity is what they aspire to. Now, if I ask them, what does race mean? Now, they'll have an understanding of, oh, these are categories into which we put people in. So what does racial equity mean? Well, if racial equity doesn't mean an equitable share of the American dream of prosperity for all of these different categories of people, then we're not on the same page. So now we have to figure out, well, what does racial equity mean to those who are not CEOs and investors and those kinds of folks in the banking industry? Well, they're saying it means equitable access to resources and opportunity. And the answer is, yes, it does. But that's the starting point. Equitable access to resources for all races of people ends with ownership of the American dream, equitable ownership in the American dream of prosperity. And so if we can come to an agreement on what things mean, we can then begin to talk about how do we create pathways so that those things can come to fruition in our society. Does that make sense?
Yes. I actually was really caught by the quote, racial equity starts with race, but the destination is ownership on your website. And so I was going to bring that up and ask you to talk about ownership because that really caught me. Yeah. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to build to that? And that was,
Well said.
The destination is ownership. I think that's... I would be interested to hear some of the whys around common ground conversations. I've heard some pieces. I mean, it started with the prompting to talk about talking to people about how to talk to your kids on race. But I imagine there are some stories in that. And are there any stories of,
it's so interesting because doing this together is such an absolute yes. We talked about yeses. I often say, it's amazing to me the way that the story of my life and Mike's life before each other and separately, and my passion and my background and study and Mike's, the way that those two things, how we are married, and then out of that, it's really truthfully like this feels like a natural outflow of like who we are made to be. Like this is very much who God designed me to be, who God designed Mike to be, and then in partnership to together facilitate. And so often when we're co-facilitating, it's like, I'm so glad that you're here. And so like, it feels so
Vice
good.
versa.
And it's so great to have a partner who in so many ways we're so different and also so fundamentally the same. And so it's really just wildly incredible to see how that flows. And so this, all of this feels like, I say it's a holy invitation. It has felt like that from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like this is what we're invited into doing. This is who we are as people. This is our passion, and this is our family, and it's also what we love and know, and what we're kind of where we are. And so it's just been like a natural yes.
I just heard a quote yesterday on, and I don't know who to give credit to for this quote, but was something about your work is the space where the world's great need.
Buchner.
Yeah, that's it.
That is actually so beautiful. I love that so much.
Do you know it? Like, do you know the quote, or should I like stumble through it? And you wanna?
The last name is Buchner, Frederick Buchner. I'm pretty sure, but it is. It's where what the world needs and what your gift or passion is, that overlap.
You're like joy.
That's where your joy is. And now I wish that I had the right words, but I love it, Gabby. That's what this feels like.
Yeah.
I also want to say that aside from us being a multiracial family, we're a multicultural family.
Yeah.
The culture of communal family that I came from, when I came to Oregon, I missed that.
Yeah.
Because, and we talk about this in our CGC Conversations journey, that there was a clash of cultures when the Europeans came to this continent, where there were already 500 plus nations that in existence. And many of them, if not most of them, had communal cultures. Whereas the collectivism culture of individualism,
No,
I mean, I've messed up. The individualism culture of the Europeans clashed with the collectivism culture of the natives. And I grew up in a collectivism culture, a communal culture.
Yeah.
And when I came to Oregon, it was a lot about individual.
Yeah.
And so we talk about this in our CGC journey, that we're all on a spectrum somewhere between collectivism and individualism, but depending on where we are.
Yeah.
Because, if you have a 401k, you're quite on the individual form, part of the spectrum. But if you're playing on a team, you're quite with the collectivism part of the spectrum. And so it just depends on your environment. So we're not one thing or the other, but we have a place of comfort.
That's right.
And my place of comfort was with collectivism. And so when I came to Oregon, it was quite a culture shock.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand why people were behaving the way they were, and still do. But I adjusted. And I adjusted because I have a beautiful wife to help me understand those things and to help me adjust. So we're a multicultural family as well as a multiracial family.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Now, so we swim in the waters of individualism, and sometimes when you swim in the water, you can forget what it looks like, or that it is what it is. Could you give some examples to the way in which living in Oregon and the individualism that is a part of the culture here, what it looks like?
I'll flip that.
Okay, that might be easier.
When my nephew,
Yeah.
my sister's one of her sons graduated from college, he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life, and so he decided to come here and stay with his Uncle Mike and Aunt Emily. And 2 years later, he finally understood where he wanted to go and what he wanted to do. And today, he's a history teacher in Texas, and he's a coach, and he's doing the actual things that he wants to do. But he did not know that he wanted to do that till he came and stayed with us.
Yeah.
And the idea of taking in our nephew, that's what family does.
Mike didn't even give it two thoughts. It was just like, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And to see for me to see how absolutely natural and effortless that was.
Yeah.
It was, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, he wants some guidance and he wants to live with Uncle Mike and the family, of course. And it was really a learning experience for me to know that sort of culturally, it's more of a considered thing. It's a big decision and should be, it's a lot to take on, which of course it is.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. It was the very best thing. And I'm so thankful in a million ways. Our entire family was blessed. I mean, of course.
Yeah.
But that is a great example of how your collectivist mindset isn't evaluating personal impact or cost. It's like, you're a part of here we are. Yes. Not is it going to impact me, but yes.
Right, because of course there's a sacrifice. Of course there's an impact, but the blessings, that's where the focus is. It's on how can I bless my nephew, and of course my nephew blessed us.
Yes.
And
A million times.
and in ways we could never have imagined.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the idea of family not just being your immediate family, but being your extended family and being your friendship circle. And my wife right now has friends who we regard as family. So that is the kind of culture that I am familiar with, I grew up in, and I don't see a lot of in the environment here in Oregon. And, even some of the decisions I made, people on the outside looking in can question those decisions.
Oh, sure.
Because they don't fit into the paradigm of how families operate.
Yeah. I think we forget about culture being so
Gabby.
huge
Yes, Gabby.
in our lives. Yeah.
And being able to evaluate, even reflect on, for me, it was eye-opening to just be able to give language to individualistic or collectivist. And when you look at it, again, we sort of hold it out here. We hold it out here. And as we always say, this is not right or wrong. This is we ask our participants to sort of, we think through both, and then where are you on the spectrum? There isn't a right or wrong.
Yeah.
But the power and the empowerment is when I can identify where I tend to lean. And then when I see somebody else leaning differently, I can go, oh, I have some understanding.
Yeah.
It's not such a foreign thing. I actually understand this is just a completely different cultural perspective at times.
Yes, and it took me learning the culture here to adopt and adapt.
Yeah. 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 I could keep talking to you two forever. Are there any little bits of pieces, no matter how random they are, things on your mind or your heart that you want to get to voice?
I have the phrase in my mind, like, there is hope and there is so much space for hope. And so I remain very hopeful. And I think that however daunting a thing can feel, like, we really are in this together, and like there isn't an enormous thing that you or I, that we all have to do. We just have to kind of keep saying yes. And there is so much hope and potential in like every single person that wants to sort of just step in and say yes and listen and learn, right?
Yes, and I also think that if we expand our networks of people with whom we have proximity.
Thank you for bringing that up.
My wife loves to talk about proximity because proximity brings about empathy and curiosity of what others think and the way they behave and their ideas. Sincere curiosity, not disingenuous questioning, but sincere curiosity to learn and understand others. I think the more we can create proximity with a diversity of people, we can learn so much rather than going through life trying to just spew what we think
That's right.
out into the world, but rather to understand that there's value that other people have to contribute.
That's right.
That we can learn from.
Yes.
And that proximity can be gained in a variety of ways, because I think I hear people locally say, well, I just don't have, a wide group of friends that doesn't look like me, live like me, behave like me. So keep proximity as a goal and be proximate in person, ideally, but you can gain proximity to different people and different ideas by what we read, by what we attend, by what we listen to, by the choices that we make. Choose proximity. I love that. So good.
There's something about the layers of, we might not be able to be proximate in person with someone from a particular group of people, but I bet there are some other groups of people that are not your own kind of group of people that you could be proximate to. And it's amazing how the learning that you do with any kind of person that might be other, how that grows and matures and translates. That's totally the word I was looking for. That translates to all the rest. So there are so many ways we can be proximate. And I think I want to leave on that piece. I mean, we can keep adding on, but wherever we're at, whoever we are, there are ways in which we can practice proximity. And what is that? Maybe you do have somebody in your life that you can be with and practice being with and create spaces to be with. Maybe it is a book that is from a different perspective, written from someone that has a different life experience or culture or whatever it be, or race than you. But we can practice that proximity, and there's deep beauty that comes from that kind of curiosity.
That's right.
Yeah. It's a joy to be with you too. Thank you so much.
Gabby. Thank you so much. This was a delight.
That is the word.
Thank you.
Thank you.